Welcome, everybody. Welcome in. Welcome in. We'll get started in a second or two.
Hello.
The chance to gather.
Welcome all. Yes, feel free to use all the emojis. Yes, thank you, Nicole, for the text. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. We're just going to give the floor to Nicole and Allison to make an announcement and then hand over to our moderator, Dominique.
Yay. Hello, everyone. I'm Nicole Hendricks.
I'm Allison Mann.
We're the co-founders of the BRIC Foundation. We are longtime partners of Leslie and Legends Animated. And over the years, we've been really inspired by the work and the way that Legends Animated has shifted their focus on creator co-ops in the animation space. As the industry changes and the world changes, we just really believe in creators taking control of their careers and their destinies and hopefully banding together to create more creator co-ops. So with that said, we're dropping it here first. But we're going to be offering a 5K grant for people to create their own animation co-ops. You just need to be a group of 3. Please fill out this interest form and we'll send the whole proposal over. BRIC volunteers, please repost this maybe halfway through and towards the end as more people kind of filter and filter out. But learn from these women today, things that you would need. Like, please, these people are wonderful resources for you. They're doing the work, and they have the answers. So just please, this can be for you. This absolutely should be for you. You can take control of your art.
I think it's really, this was inspired by a little bit of yesterday, a lot of influence through these conversations. And, it's something that we can do to help pay it forward of all the amazing knowledge shares that everybody and ideas. So it's in action and hopefully, something amazing comes out of it.
And July 9th and 10th at El Camino Community College, if you're in the LA area, we're going to be doing workshops on all different aspects of how to start those business angles. We'd love to have Leslie and whoever here as well. But there'll also be like lawyers as well to kind of do some mutual aid type of things. So please, this is for you. This is absolutely for you.
All right. Have a great panel, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.
So exciting. Oh my goodness. Welcome, everybody, to our panel today, How to Start Up and Manage Your Own Creator-Owned Business. Hi, I'm Dominique Pearson. I am a co-op developer at LA Co-op Lab. We are an organization here in LA focusing on supporting the worker cooperative movement across industries. And we do a lot of work as far as business development and support for folks who are really trying to get to this dream that Nicole and Allison really are talking about, as far as being able to put ourselves first, being able to have autonomy and take control of our workplaces and create beautiful spaces where we can create positively. And so me and our panelists here today are gonna have a little chat about some of these things. If folks have questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat and we'll gather them to take them in a session at the end. Leslie, you have anything to add?
No, well, it would help if you put like a Q maybe next to your question so that, because I see some lovely comments, but then that way it could help Dominique differentiate between comments and questions.
Thanks, Leslie. Oh, yes, Melissa, so excited. Please. So I'm going to give our panelists a chance to quickly introduce themselves, their names, their pronouns, where they work at, and then we are going to have a little discussion about some questions, and hopefully folks will be able to learn. So you want to start with Leslie? Let us know who you are.
Sure. So hi everyone, welcome to our panel. My name is Leslie Ezeh. I'm Director of Operations at Asifa Hollywood. Some of you may know the Annie Awards. We're the organization that hosts the Annie Awards every year. But for this particular panel, I want to lift up another organization I'm a part of, Legends Animated, which is a worker self-directed nonprofit that supports independent animation and its creators. And starting this year, we want to help support in development of animation worker co-ops. So very excited to dive into that. We're based in Los Angeles and she, her pronouns. And I will pass it back to Dominique.
Thank you, Leslie. Sruti, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, folks. My name is Shruti Suryanarayanan. I say them pronouns. I'm calling in a couple hours ahead of time from the East Coast on Lenape-Hopking, just south of Prospect Park Lake. And I'm here representing Art.coop. We are a hub for artists, creatives, culture workers, collectives who are committed to not just resisting capitalism, but building the solidarity economy, the art worlds that we want. And we do this through a little bit of resourcing, a little bit of political education, and a lot of connection with the folks. And so I'm really happy to be here to talk about the larger solidarity economy movement and how creatives fit in.
Work. Camila?
Hey y'all. My name is Camila Tapia. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm in Baltimore. I'm representing two organizations today. The first is the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops. We are the only national membership organization in the U.S. representing worker co-ops and democratic workplaces. So we represent the estimated 1,300 worker co-ops in the U.S. and their 15,000 workers. My role specifically is doing training and education for our field and yeah, just spreading the word about worker co-ops more broadly. And I'm also the co-founder of Transverse Cooperative. We're an artist-owned worker co-op based in Baltimore, and we do commissions, mixed media art commissions for values-aligned organizations. So in other words, they're doing social movement work. And yeah, this can look like a lot of things. It can look like coloring books, zines, political education. And our ultimate goal is not to support, not only support social movements with art, but also to collectively organize artists. And part of the way we're trying to do that is eventually we would like to own a building in Baltimore and have a housing co-op for the worker owners of the worker-owned co-op. I'll pass it back to you, Dominique.
Thank you, Camila. Work. Y'all are so impressive. Like I said, I'm Dominique. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a co-op developer at LA Co-op Lab. I'm also an herbalist and a local farmer out here in South LA, Tonga territory. And I've been doing cooperative development for about 10 years. And I would love to hear from the audience, and by here I mean through the chat, if anyone knows anything about co-ops. Does anyone know what a co-op is, have any definitions, any ideas? Please feel free to throw any ideas in the chat that you have, because I don't want to give y'all the spiel if I don't need to. If there are any experts in the room, we'd love to know. Okay, we see employee-owned company. What else? School co-ops. Anyone else? Democratically run with members having a say in decisions and policies. Anyone else? One or two more? Everyone is an owner. Yes, yes. Okay, so it sounds like there are folks in here who are familiar, right? So the idea of a co-op, right, is one member, one vote, right? Democratically run organizations where folks are coming together to meet their needs. And so that can look like a lot of things, right? That can look like a consumer-owned co-op, which is something like a food co-op, where everyone who shops there gets to be the owner of that space, right? That can look like a producer co-op, right? You have like the Land O'Lakes Butter Company, where you have all of these dairy farmers and they all make their butter and they are producers who collectively own their distribution space, right? And then we have worker co-ops, right? Where we have folks who are in workplaces, who are putting in their labor, who are creating beautiful things, and they are the ones who get to own their company, get to own their means of their labor. And we think this is important for a lot of reasons, right? Because one, because our traditional workplaces they kind of suck, right? Like folks don't have autonomy, folks don't have the ability to take care of themselves, folks are not getting paid what they're worth. And not only that, but like folks who aren't doing that work are getting paid tons of money based off the backs of our labor, right? We have places that are not understanding of folks' personal things, right? You can't take time off, you can't get maternity leave. There are all sorts of issues that we understand we deal with in our workplaces. And so many of those come because we as workers don't have a say in what goes on. We don't make our policies, we don't make our bylaws, we don't have ownership over the means of our production, over the creation of our labor. And so co-ops are a structure that we really use to give that power back to us, right? To create structures in which we can own our processes. We can take control over what we're doing. We can have a say in what we do, where it goes, and who gets to benefit from it. And yes, we're going to answer some of these questions, right? About how the answer is yes, you can develop a co-op without a budget. You can develop a co-op with little to no structural support at all, right? Things take as much time as they take. And we'll get a little bit more into those details later. But I want to start us off with our first question, which is, what does cooperation mean to you and your organization? And what brought you here to the worker co-op ecosystem? And maybe we'll start with Sruti.
Thank you, Dominique. Yeah, I think that a large part of what cooperation means to Art.coop, and to me, and those things are, I think, they feed each other in a really beautiful way, because that's the nature of a co-op, right? Is that the organization is as much a reflection of its people as the people are reflections of the organization. And so our work in cooperation is, one, learning how the detailed aspects of worker cooperatives applies more broadly, or can be extracted and used in principled ways in nonprofit models, in collective models where money maybe isn't present, but there is still shared decision making and thus shared power, what that can look like. And we try to bring those people together to think about not just cooperating within our organizations, not just cooperating within our households, within our workplaces, but then building connections between my workplace and, say, Camila's workplace. What does it look like then when we are in like a sustainable, healthy, like co-working relationship where we can give according to our abilities, receive according to our needs, but then also offer to each other what I like to call like critical compassion, so that we are growing our cooperatives, our organizations in the direction of the solidarity economy, rather than maybe falling into some of the things that racial capitalism tries to make us fall into. And in terms of what brought me here into this, is that a lot of it comes from my own experiences in art school, under the arts education, arts institution space, where I was really taught that it was about competition. It was not me and my friends, it was me or my friend. And that just felt so demoralizing, and also felt counterintuitive, because I had grown up as a child of immigrants, seeing people always sharing things. Mutual aid became a big buzzword in 2020, but y'all, we've been doing this shit for centuries. And I think that's where I began to enter not only the co-op world, but really what I'm here to talk about is the solidarity economy, right? Is that the co-op world is one aspect of this larger movement that has roots so far into our DNA, that if we just remember them and harness them, we can actually build the future that we've always been working towards. And so for me, it feels like it's a question of both resisting the narratives that we've always been told are normal when they're really exploitative and extractive, and also remembering the ancestral elements of cooperation, and working to prioritize those values of cooperation, even when we're in silos. And I think all of us will talk about this a little bit later, but even within our movement, even within the arts, right? Especially now, it's important to have a solid front, and to have a solid front means cooperating. check for now.
Thank you, Sruti. Leslie?
Yeah, I really resonate what Shruti is saying. I guess just to add to it, and well, I connect with the reasons behind what Shruti said, even though may have different experiences. But to add to that, a couple of different reasons or different ways being cooperation, what it means to me and my team at Legends Animated. And the reason why we became a worker self-directed nonprofit, which essentially is a nonprofit version of a worker co-op, it's two different reasons. Mainly because I think we've naturally been highly collaborative as a team. And in becoming aware of solidarity economy and worker co-ops, it just seemed natural to take that promise to ourselves to be intentional about keeping things democratic, especially in this time of age where, I mean, it just feels like there is some it's precarious right now, our democratic state of things now, at least in my point of view. And it seems like it's just to at least make a commitment among ourselves that democracy is important to us, being intentional, making sure everyone is seen and heard and their voices are being taken into consideration when making both creative and business decisions, is very important just to reinforce that in our spaces as well as in our community. And it's not only something that aligns with our values, it's smart decision making, business decision making. When your fellow workers are seen and heard and they feel like there's value in what they're doing, it just makes what you're doing better. It makes, of course, humans, there can be conflict and so forth, but even working through that and coming out on the other side, you come out with an even better understanding of yourself and your coworkers, and that's a great meaningful process in of itself. So yeah, just um, our commitment to being a worker self-directed nonprofit is really that promise to ourselves to that we each matter and we want to stay in that space. And we're taking it to another level now as a co-op developer, by encouraging our fiscal sponsees to consider that as well and to not only, kind of invite people to also think intentionally about that, but see the benefit in that in their creative businesses as well. So I can go into it more later, but I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Leslie. Camila?
All right, yes to all of that. I think some of my story will kind of, yeah, add into what both of y'all were saying. So what brought me to the worker co-op ecosystem was that around a decade ago, I was in college and had the opportunity to just be in community with this worker co-op called the Maryland Food Collective, which had been around for 44 years, and was a center for mutual aid and activism at the university, as well as food justice. And so I ended up working there and was in charge of hosting a lot of our community events. And so it really showed me like how labor could be done so that community could be a part of the business, feed people, do mutual aid. And it changed my expectations of what my working conditions should be. And so, yeah, the seed was planted pretty early on that I wanted to form an artist worker co-op. It's really difficult to become a full-time artist without struggling financially, or you have to be coming from a lot of privilege. And so I realized by forming a co-op, we could collectivize our risk and share our business skills with each other. Because typically visual artists have to do everything on their own as entrepreneurs or work for someone else and not learn any of those business ownership skills. And I also realized, we could live into our values and escape some of the traditional ideas of how to be successful in the capitalist art market. So I found a couple of other folks who had the same issues with how we're exploited as visual artists and also believed in the power of collective organizing. And we didn't want to be an artist collective without structure because a lot of times in our experiences, those structureless artist collectives had a lot of unnamed power dynamics, and would just end up replicating the power dynamics that we were trying to fight against. And so we wanted to use the worker co-op model to create a more equitable workplace through structure and through naming power dynamics so that we could figure out what folks' different needs were and how to address them along with their strengths. So to get to this question of what does cooperation mean to us, we of course cooperate internally, and right now make decisions by consensus or delegating decisions to one person or another. And we make sure to communicate about the kinds of labor we're each taking on. So that way, again, like we're making it more equitable given, what we each need and what we're each good at and where we want to grow. We also cooperate with the broader movement in terms of our clientele. So some examples of the types of groups we work with have included like other worker co-ops. Some of them have been bars and cafes. We've worked with a couple of different community-owned energy groups. We've worked with researchers researching, around gentrification, and lots of other different folks. And so we get to cooperate with the broader social movement that we're trying to uplift, by making art for them. And also we cooperate in terms of how we source a lot of our work, or source out some of our work. When we feel like we can't take work on, we often refer folks to Design Action Collective, which is a worker co-op of graphic designers. We do our printing through Radex and Works Printing, two other worker co-ops who've been around for a while. And yeah, we're excited to connect with Leslie because sometimes we have people coming to us for animation and we don't do animation right now. So we'll be able to, refer folks to y'all's network, which is so exciting. And yeah, we also give and get advice and peer learn with other organizations all the time in an effort to build a culture of solidarity in our work. And so that's for Transverse. For the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops, we steward cooperation at a national scale. And so cooperation looks like us being democratic internally with our membership being made up of worker co-ops, and those worker co-ops get to vote for our board, and our board guides the entire direction of the organization. Shout out Dominique, they are on our board. Within the teams that I'm a part of doing training and education, we have the co-op clinic and our consulting team. With co-op clinic, we provide training and business development with the leadership of worker co-ops across the country because we believe in peer-to-peer learning as a way to uplift the movement. And our consulting team works more broadly with organizations outside of the worker co-op field who want to learn how to cooperate. So to us, cooperation means economic democracy and building power, especially for communities that have been disenfranchised from ownership in their workplaces. So thanks for putting that in the chat, Shruti, and I'll pass it back to you, Dominique.
Yeah, thanks, y'all. Those are beautiful, very thorough answers. I really appreciate the way that y'all, I think, sort of highlight so much of the like different things that sort of are going into this cooperative space. And you sort of brought up a little bit about process, Camila, and I'm seeing like some of the questions about process in sorry about that. Excuse the cars. I see some questions a little bit about process in the chat. And so I would love, as we're answering the second question, for folks to think a little bit about about process as we're sort of thinking about this question. So, what has prompted you to grow and dismantle internalized beliefs that have held you back from stewarding a creative business? Excuse me, I'm going to move. And how does the work of cooperating build on this internal work? And I think that feels connected to process for me because I think so much of the democratic process of being in a cooperative really can transform you and the way that you're engaging with your work and the way that you're engaging with other people. And so I would just love for y'all to talk a little bit about sort of the process of cooperation as y'all are experiencing it in your workplaces and how that's affecting y'all and the beliefs that you hold. And maybe this time we can start with Leslie, if you don't mind.
Sure. I think just I'm gonna ground it in just my experience of um, yeah, how I had to deal with my internal issues with the idea of starting a business. Um, Honestly, knowing about the worker co-op business model was the aha moment for me. I before that I thought, the idea of starting a business was so above me, like that's just for people coming from Harvard Business School or what have you, or people with funding um, from their rich parents. It has nothing to do with me. But that all changed when a friend uh, of mine invited me to fill in an admin role he needed filled for his electrical company, which he formed as a worker co-op. And I didn't know really much. I knew very preliminarily because I was in a student housing co-op in college. I knew very minimally about co-ops, but I didn't really realize fully about worker co-ops until that experience. And that work experience was very eye-opening for me and started my journey of learning more about worker co-ops, about other types of co-ops that Dominique mentioned earlier, and just the solidarity economy in general. And it's just like, wow, there's like this whole other way to just live and live in a people-oriented manner that where people come first, and it's not profits for the sake of profits. Screw the worker and, let's just squeeze out the worker. It's like, no, there's this whole different way of doing things that gives power to workers and lets them, reap the fruits of of their labor. So yeah, not only that philosophy was highly aligned with me, and it also made business seem so accessible and doable for me because you don't have to do everything yourself. You don't have to do all the research yourself. You don't have to find all the resources yourself. You and your team can share that responsibility and labor collectively, and you each have your strengths. So if someone is great at marketing, cool, do the marketing part. I mean, I personally hate marketing, so yes, let someone else do that. I'm more of the business mind. I can do bookkeeping and admin. So yes, I would do that. So just share instead of you, this one artist or creator doing all of that and being overwhelmed and not having the capacity to do the actual creation that you want to do, you have this shared responsibility. And then you have that bandwidth to do the creation and do that part collectively and make that even more enriching for you all. And of course, if hopefully your projects do well and then you see it doesn't go to a CEO that has nothing to do with anything. It goes directly to you and your fellow coworkers. So that was just a mind-blowing experience for me, knowing that this model exists. And in my experience, both back when I was, this was several years ago at the Electrical Worker Co-op and now at Legends Animated, just the idea of sharing that ownership of the business you're building together as well, that kind of helps build that empowerment and helps keep that internal, oh, I can't do this, keeps that in check as you're collectively, because you collectively have the tools to meet your creative business goals together. And as for the process to do that, I can go into a little bit later, but in essence, at Legends Animated, we are members of the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops that Dominique and Camilla are connected to. And they have this great membership page that we basically use as a blueprint for fiscal sponsees to kind of do step-by-step process of how to be a startup worker co-op. So I highly recommend checking out the Federation of Worker Co-ops website on that. And we basically guide our fiscal sponsees step by step on resources to get articles of incorporation, resources to how to create your bylaws in a way that's a worker co-op, that has worker co-ops in mind, or the framework in mind. So yeah, we're basically holding your hand in making sure those steps get met. And as Camilla mentioned, the co-op clinic is a great resource to kind of transition from that startup phase or conversion phase. If you already have an existing business that you want to convert into a co-op, you can totally do that. And the co-op clinic helps you every step of the way. And what Legends Animated can do also is help you find funding for that as a fiscal sponsee. And even if you're not a fiscal sponsee, we can point you to resources because we want co-ops to happen, whether it's within our clientele or outside. We will definitely can point you to free resources to get you started. Yeah, and I'll stop there.
Thanks, Leslie. Camila?
Yeah, I was gonna say a similar thing of just like, I don't know, regardless of other identities, but especially if you're part of a marginalized community, like I notice a sense of imposter syndrome when it comes to artists and being business owners because I don't know, I feel like I was told for a long time in different subliminal and direct ways that like artists are not good with money and are not good with administration and just don't have the brain for that. And even like in art school, I had to like take a separate degree to study entrepreneurship. So I did a double major. Um, but yeah, most artists don't have that option if they're just going to a straight up art school. Like they just don't teach you anything about business ownership. Um, and I mean, it's not true at a very basic level because being an artist requires you to be well organized and also running a business is very creative. And I feel that with a worker co-op, you have to be even more creative because society is not set up for collective groups, you know? So the worker co-op field has had to make a lot of its own structures to meet the needs of worker co-ops. So yeah, I mean, someone asked a question earlier about I think, yeah, funding and like starting up without funding. And just to speak to like internalized beliefs, you know, and yeah, just not feeling like maybe worthy of ownership and like there's so many systemic things keeping you down from being able to partake in owning something. Like the worker co-op ecosystem has its own funding mechanisms. So we have um, different groups that provide loans specifically to worker co-ops because a lot of traditional banks don't know how to deal with like more than two or three signers on a loan because they want to put all of that risk on like one individual when they're giving out money. So yeah, worker co-op loan funds do this in a non-extractive way where they don't, at least seed commons, one of the big ones that I'm thinking of, seed commons will give out a loan to a worker co-op that they've made sure has a sustainable business plan, and they support oftentimes the businesses to have a developed plan. And then they don't start taking you know, payments on the loan until you're profitable. And so there's just a mutual interest tied up in the loan giver and the loan receiver versus in our traditional economy. There's not that reciprocal relationship. Yeah, Shruti, I feel like you were also speaking earlier to just like internalized beliefs around competition and cooperation. And I mean, there's definitely the whole myth of like the solo genius artist, usually a white man. And so it's hard to like see yourself in that a lot of times because this idea of a person is either like hyper successful or they're a starving artist. And I mean, I think, yeah, there's like some truth to that in the traditional art market because we're looking to the uber wealthy to buy our stuff. We're competing for a very limited amount of grants. And, if we're trying to create big projects like murals, installations, what have you, there's usually like a lead artist and they get all the credit, even if there are a bunch of smaller artists working for them doing most of the labor. So there are ways in which in the fine art market, like artists are working collectively, but then even so, like only one artist gets all of the credit for it, which only advances like one person's career in a significant way. So yeah, that was very frustrating for me and my co-founders. And for us, we wanted to make art for those that need art and are not getting art. And so part of that was like tapping into the entrepreneurial mindset of like, who needs my skills? Like, what is the niche in the market that is not being filled? And so we were thinking about how our skills are being artists, but also activists and organizers. And so we realized that a lot of the social movements that we were a part of are not very like culturally always attractive spaces to people, either aesthetically or just in the way that like culture is or isn't mixed into the social movements. And so we realized that as artists and culture workers, we could fill that void. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think that it's important to like recognize your worth as an artist and like recognize how um, you can be creative with these challenges that are being presented to us. And yeah, I'll pass it back.
Thanks, Camila. Sruti?
Thank you, folks. Yeah, I mean, both of what y'all are saying resonates a lot. Like that internalized myth, the internalized, I mean, it's the reality of living in this world is that there is so much propaganda, ideology, institutionalized culture that tries to say that our bodies, our ideas, our lives aren't worth it. And I think that ultimately is like what, for me, the solidarity economy is all about. Um, Challenging, and I think the biggest two things come to mind in terms of like processes that really spoke to me, and that we actually use at Art.coop to work with all our artists and all our worker co-op members and community members, is the offers and needs market, which I'll drop a link to, um, which everyone should check out. It's a beautiful way to think about what can you bring to a community and what can you receive from your community, because the reality is that it's solidarity, it's not charity, which is the title of the report that our brilliant co-founders wrote. But that's what this is about, right? It's about mutual exchange. It's about recognizing your own ability to give and to need. Um, and the other process that I really, really enjoy is story circling, which harkens back to the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in the late 60s. And I'm happy to share a PDF via our resource link later. But I think one of the things that really helped me see is that every single person who comes into a space has a story they have been told, a story that they have told themselves about capitalism, about racism, about how the two enmesh, and then that affects the work that they produce. And in turn, we think about things in the terms of competition or in the terms of scarcity, when in reality, neither of those are true. Rather than fighting over scraps, right, we can unite and fight for the full meal. And I think that's a little bit of where I come from in terms of the politics of it. When it comes to business, when it comes to cooperatives, when it comes to hierarchy, I think for the most part, I grew up with the idea that nonprofits were the way to go. Because they're not holding on to the money, they must be amazing. I mean, we all know that's not necessarily true. And so I think what the offers and needs market and story circles also show you is that power shows up in a lot of different ways, right? And I think that is another internalized belief that it's not just money is a really important indicator of power, but other things can indicate power too. And the work of cooperation, the work of solidarity is to disentangle that and to distribute everything on our terms, for us, by us. Um, and Art.coop, a little bit about our structure is that unlike Legends and unlike the Federation and unlike Transverse, we are fully a nonprofit with a fiscal sponsor. We have all of our money comes from philanthropy because most of the work that we do that raises money comes from organizing funders, people with wealth to think about how they can stop perpetuating an exploitative or extractive arts world and instead give into something that is regenerative um, and meets the needs of more people on their terms. And so our money comes through philanthropy and then through programs like our Remember the Future Fellowship, through our participation in coalitions like the New Economy Coalition and the Solidarity Economy Principles Project, we're able to move these funds out. And I want to name that like one of the things that right now we're thinking about as the reality of grants and business under this period of time hits us is what our future could be. While we are a worker self-directed collective, we've also thought about co-ops, and I think one of the things that we've also thought about how we could change into a co-op, and the people that we go to whenever we have this like, I don't know, uh feels like a midlife crisis question. It's the Sustainable Economies Law Center, um, because they have amazing legal resources on how to structure your group, regardless of whether it's a worker cooperative, worker self-directed nonprofit. If you're just a collective of people organizing and moving money to support your own creative needs, they're really amazing. And all of this comes back to, I think, the larger collective realization, right? The cooperation is there's no need for one person to be anything and everything. It's actually the another push of this movement is to lean into trust with everyone else and to hold the whole the arts world of our economy of our ecosystem with each other rather than out of fear or scarcity trying to clench up. And so those are some things that I want to offer to the space. Yeah. To you, Dominique.
Thanks, y'all. We are going to forgo the third question because there's just been so much juiciness. We don't have time. Oh my goodness. So we're gonna try to address some of the questions in the chat. And so I see like a mix of some like sort of direct response questions and some more sort of like conversational questions. And so how many do you think we have time for, Leslie? Like 3 or 4?
They gave us to a 4, so maybe we could formally
Okay.
end at 4, but if folks want to stay on and we can informally address those questions that we haven't addressed.
Yeah, that sounds great. So let's see. Our first question. Let's talk about business creation. Leslie Park says that he's interested to hear, or they, sorry, excuse me, Leslie. They're interested to hear in people's experiences in creating their businesses. Were there partnerships with people to find funding? How do you establish leadership? Anything else that you found interested in creating y'all's businesses? And so if you could talk a little bit about the process of the creation of your businesses or your organizations, or also how your organizations help other businesses create or develop themselves. I think either of those responses might be helpful for our folks. Sruti, you want to start us off? Anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just gonna find Leslie's question in the chat so I can make sure I gather all the points. For the most part, we go to pretty standard groups. If we what we can offer is a little bit of one-on-one coaching, a little bit of ideation support to think through the logistics of how people work together and how the art itself is created. But when it comes down to the administration, we are always sending folks to Seed Commons, to the Sustainable Economies Law Center, and to the Federation, just because they are such deep resource, like deep wells of knowledge and generosity, um, that's just where we look. And one of the things that Art.coop is trying to do is turn what can be really dense, legalese or financialese into something that is digestible and also doesn't feel overwhelming. And in a resource list later, you'll see that we have some free courses that just help you walk through what being in a co-op or in a non-hierarchical organization could look like.
Okay.
That's
I guess I can go next. Yeah, great question, Leslie. I could speak from my experience. I tend to gravitate, well, for our current board, I gravitate towards people I am highly aligned with. I think that's absolutely important. And I think each of us are leaders, not or just can lead. It's just a matter of maybe having different types of leadership. There's different ways you can show up as a leader. Um, and so, well, that's what I believe philosophically. And so with that, and with the model of a worker co-op where essentially everyone is a lead in that they're co-owners with you. I invited to my board people I've worked with for years now that I know we're aligned with, and even if and they have the I want to say emotional tools to where even if we have some tension or disagreement, there's a commitment to work through it together and not shy away from it. Or, you know, I'm sure we've all experienced people who are conflict avoidant, or, they just whatever have you, people who just may not have those tools. So I think so far they have, or at least they're committed to learning the tools. And the Co-op Clinic is a great resource for things like conflict resolution, support. And Legends Animated also can point you to tons of great free resources for conflict resolution. But essentially, so far, you are highly aligned in values with that person, and they're interested and they're open to making sure they address conflict together collectively. To me, that's all I need to be in partnership with people. And I'm looking at your question here to make sure. So that's me, but if you have, and it's totally valid if you have a more robust criteria, that's totally understandable. But that's what my criteria would be. And that's how I formed with Legends Animated. And also when we have fiscal sponsees that want to form co-ops, that's the advice we give them. Um, Partnerships for funding. Yeah, in the process, and that's a great way to even suss out in trying to do projects together, whether it's financial, trying to find financial support, or say you were a student that just graduated, you worked on a student film together, you already know based on that experience who you worked well with, who was, showed up, met deadlines. That's a great person to connect with after you graduate to form something. If you are a already seasoned veteran, I'm speaking specifically for the animation and gaming space. You got laid off for the umpteenth time, but you already know people you've worked with for years now in the trenches who got laid off with you. I mean, that's a great built-in system right there for you. You could invite those folks to kind of create something and co-own something together. So yeah, look around you to colleagues you worked well with in the past and invite them to dream big about possibilities in a co-op setting. I think yeah, I'll leave it there. Mm.
Thanks, Leslie. I also see a few questions in the chat about resources, specifically around like funding and grant support and development support. And so if any of y'all want to share anything that y'all's organizations do to support folks in that development or funding support space, we'd love to hear that. And I can start us off just by sharing a little bit about LA Co-op Lab. We are located in the LA area and we focus on folks sort of in the LA County and Southern California in general. And we do a lot of the work very similar to the Federation. We're a member of the Federation as well. We offer a lot of business technical support, supporting folks in their development of decision making, governance, like business development, budgeting, pro formas, all of the business development things. Because I think something that's important for folks to be reminded of is co-ops worker co-ops are a business, not like any other business, but they are a business, right? They are a business that works in a particular kind of way. And so all of the structure that folks need for businesses to go, right? All of the break even, all of the capital, all of the issues and things that go along with the regular business, we still have to deal with, but the load is deeply lessened because we're able to share it equally across our owners, right? And so a lot of those business skills that folks are getting in these other places are very much transferable, and you can get support in those ways. And so LA Co-op Lab is a space where we can help support you in doing those things, handhold you through templates and filling out forms and things like that. We can also support you in getting loans through C Commons because we're a member of them as well. And if there are any other funding or development support resources that our panelists want to share with us, please do. Anyone?
Yeah, I just posted on the chat something that Allison and Nicole shared earlier for those who came on a little later. So BRIC has just started their grant program specifically for worker co-ops. You're welcome to submit. Very exciting. Hoping to Legends Animated is definitely on board to helping them develop that. Hopefully we can even grow that. It's starting off as 5,000, but and there's hopes to grow that even further for those who are interested in forming worker co-ops. So that's one example of resources that are specifically focused on worker co-ops. And what we're hoping to do at Legends Animated is kind of stagger, pots of funding, where if you are a fiscal sponsee, you have access to apply for grants and donations that you wouldn't normally have as an individual artist. So if you couple that with becoming an animation worker co-op or a creative co-op in general, you have access to, again, other unique pots of funding. So, in this day and age, it's all about grabbing pieces of funding and making it together to, get to your budget and get the projects you want done. So the name of the game is finding them and combining them. So yeah, I again, another, endorsement to consider a co-op so that you have all this and then partner with a nonprofit. If not, maybe the nonprofit partner that Shruti mentioned or Legends Animated. Other nonprofits also offer fiscal sponsorships, but I think it behooves y'all to, if you want to do your own thing as an independent, to make yourself as accessible as possible to all the funding sources and to help make your project happen in the way that you and your team would like it to happen.
Yeah, for the Federation, I'll just shout out that we host a conference every 2 years that has like so many different sessions and tracks on like how to start up a worker co-op, how to convert an existing business into a worker co-op, lots of stuff about the ecosystem for folks who have been doing the work for a while. So that's a great space that we offer. Our next conference is going to be next year. We also have virtual peer learning spaces. So we have peer networks, which are based around different industries, and member councils, which are based around different themes. We don't currently have like an artists or creatives peer network, but if we get enough demand, we can think about doing that. And then for our co-op clinic, which thanks y'all for shouting out a few times. We have so many resources that we've put together. There's a bunch of free mini guides online that anyone can download. You can request an intake meeting with our co-op clinic, and you can meet with our team, and we kind of triage the co-op to see where it's at, like what kind of resources you need, send a big resource list. And oftentimes we end up referring out to like our regional networks because, we're a national group. And so we like to make sure to uplift the regional groups. But we also know that there's a lot of regional regions where folks are not getting enough attention. And so in those cases, we step in or where we have specific like industry expertise. And we also host a monthly startup webinar, which I'm going to start being the one to host pretty soon. So that startup webinar is the place where you can go to just see like everything about starting up a worker co-op. And yeah, it's in both English and Spanish. So I'll post a link to that. Shruti, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'm thinking that I think Dominique might have dropped out for a moment, but I'm also looking through these questions and I'm seeing some questions around hiring, which are obviously very related to the funding questions. One, I want to offer that y'all are very welcome to email the Art.coop team. My personal email I'll put in the chat, and I'm here to talk about our own funding models. I really like to read and look at budgets, so that's an offer that I'll put out there. And then the other offer that I think is important for especially in the more beginning phases, is one of the Federation's initiatives, Gilded, which is a freelancers cooperative, which I will drop a link to also in the chat. But this could be another space where folks who are independent right now, but want to see what it's like to pool together and collectively advocate for something, Gilded is a great spot to try that out. Um, and paired with the other resources that we mentioned could really tee you up to not only run a co-op, but also to be a member of other co-ops. Hey, Dominique.
Yay. In our last 2 minutes, are there any announcements? We have some announcements, right, Leslie?
Sure. Do you want to share, Shruti,
I got you. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so we have a slide for you all. You're definitely welcome to check out our link tree that Shruti is sharing in a bit. And it has a lot of the resources that were mentioned today. And for those that are maybe recently shared that are not on there will be added there as well. So you're welcome to check that out both today and a little later on. And yeah, please feel free to reach out to each of us. We're definitely available to answer any questions if you're interested in, again, starting up a worker co-op or transitioning your existing studio company to a worker co-op. We're here to provide support within the capacities we've offered today. And yeah, if you have any questions that we didn't get to, please feel free to reach out to us as well. And I'll leave one quick thing. Legends Anime will be at WonderCon next week. So we have a panel for one of our fiscal sponsees on next Sunday. It's in the our link tree, so you're welcome to check that out if you're going to attend. And I'll defer to our panelists if they have any upcoming things happening.
Anything to share?
Yeah, I can just briefly mention that we are almost halfway through our Remember the Future Fellowship, which has some amazing examples of both cooperatives and worker self-directed collectives and nonprofits. And I especially think the work of Means TV and Group Muse would be interesting to y'all. Feel free to stay in touch with us by checking us out on Instagram. That's at _art.coop. And our website is art.coop. And y'all have my email.
Yes, and I'll just shout out that in the chat I dropped the event page for the Federation, and the next startup webinar is on April 2nd. So please come to that. And yeah, please email me. I dropped my email in the chat for the Federation and for my co-op. I love to chit chat about anything and everything related to artist worker co-ops. So please hit me up. Thank you all so much.
Yes, fantastic. Appreciate y'all so much for being here. Thank you so much to our panelists for their incredible expertise and experience. And thank you y'all for being here and listening and offering such great questions. And I hope that you all enjoy the rest of, is there a rest of the conference?
I believe so. I think it's the end of
Yeah,
it.
enjoy the rest of the
Yeah.
conference.
Yeah.
Go on with the rest of your day.
Or the rest of your day. Yeah. Thank you all. Really appreciate you being here. Thank you, fellow panelists. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.